Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Hopefully an interesting topic today, but somebody asked me why I haven't written more or recommended whey protein hydrolysates. And it was a good question. It was a fair question because I haven't written a lot on hydrolysates specifically. I do have a little section in my Q&A on it, which I will link below. But I've sort of avoided getting into real depth on hydrolysates because it's a complicated topic. There's a lot to unpack in hydrolysates from a technical perspective. It's oversimplified a lot in the marketing of hydrolysates and such. But I have to admit, I've kind of actively avoided deeper discussions on hydrolysates in my videos and my articles, and I'm hoping today maybe that sort of ends here. I thought what I would do actually is go through a study with you all in real time. Got an itch. In real time, go through a study on hydrolysates that compared hydrolysates to a intact non-hydrolysis whey protein in humans, which I thought would be a benefit. Now, if we do this, I hope you guys are going to stick with me on this. I might take some tangents and some sidebars here because, like I say, there's a lot to cover in this topic. And there's no doubt I will forget to cover something. It's just too much stuff to cover in a single video that doesn't go on forever and not miss something. I'll definitely do my best to cover the important aspects of hydrolysates versus regular intact whey protein. I'm actually having a drink right now of my recent formula, which is whey isolate, Ajinomoto collagen. It's a marine-based collagen, and hold on. And very high-grade colostrum. It's a very nice product. I have to say so myself. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but it's a hell of a product. But, all right, so back to hydrolysates. Hydrolysates obviously been around a long time. But I say there are levels and layers to the discussion of hydrolysates that can send you off in a lot of different directions, which is my thought was, like I say, if we actually, maybe we go through an actual study together and I kind of scroll through it in real time with you guys and kind of point out what I would see and the things that I would look for and what my main issues are as to why I've never been a big fan of hydrolysates. Again, which is not to say they don't have their uses. This is the problem with a lot of things in life. We're going to stick to supplements for obvious reasons because we can, I can go off into tangents in all kinds of directions. But specific to various supplements, we can say that some supplements have their uses under certain clinical conditions, certain clinical settings. There are definitely, again, unfortunately, the marketing and the positions of some, especially in the current polarized world that we're in, with influencer types that are going to, to get to clickbait you and stuff, are going to say, good, bad, avoid at all costs, terrible poison, or the greatest thing that ever was type approaches to a topic only add to the confusion. And this is certainly not where hydrolysates and certainly some other supplements come. Now, again, there are always some supplements, of course, probably most of them that are don't really look worth wasting any time on. There are some supplements such as, like creatine and whey, in my view, and stuff that are pretty much a no-brainer for everybody all the time. There are very few people that aren't going to benefit from those two, which is why I've spent so much time on them, decades, recommending them and such. But by and large, there's also a bunch of supplements that sort of fall somewhere in the middle that have possible utility under certain conditions and for certain people. And this is where we really end up with hydrolysates. So let's see, I'm going to bring in this study. Now, the reason I picked this one, it's fairly recent. It's not brand new, 2019, but it's not an old study. It's a good study in that it's examining some things that I think check off a lot of boxes. It's a direct comparison of whey hydrolysate versus regular whey. That's good. It's done in humans. That's great. Because one of my major criticisms to an awful lot of things is that there's no comparative data. That is, I'd say, for example, comparisons to creatine. A lot of your companies or studies that are looking at, say, an alternative to creatine monohydrate do not compare it to creatine monohydrate. There's the new wonder alternative, creatine versus say placebo or versus control or something. But they're not doing a direct comparison. There's no comparative data. So that makes it somewhat not completely useless, but another would be some of these new alternatives to N-acetylcysteine. If you're going like Glynac, right? Glynac, which I have a whole video about Glynac versus NAC, so I'm not going to cover it here. So if you're interested, look it up on this page. But you have these studies showing Glynac, which is N-acetylcysteine plus glycine, showing a bunch of benefits, but they don't compare it directly with NAC. And if so there's when people ask me, is Glynac superior to NAC, should I take Glynac? My answer is the same, in that the problem is we don't have comparative data. If you're gonna do a study that finds Glynac or recommend it over NAC, then you need to do a study that compares it to NAC plus placebo and so forth. So I like this study because it's whey protein hydrolysate comparative to regular whey in young healthy people. That's another one. It's not in rats, it's not in vitro, it's not in test tubes. Again, this is not saying that those other models, those other approaches to studies or to generating data are useless. They're not useless. They are just limited as to what claims and applications you can make with them. So again, I'm obviously going to be happier, as everybody should be, when you see direct comparative data, one versus the other, and in humans. That's great. In this particular model, they're using young, healthy men, so that's great. Specific to the endpoint that, the outcome that maybe you guys are going to be interested in, which is, gaining muscle mass, but we'll get to that in a second. Sometimes, again, you see studies where they were done on an older population, a sick older population, and then they apply the results of that to young, healthy athletes, obviously. So we're checking off a lot of good boxes here as to how applicable is this study, is this data to what we're trying to talk about here. So I picked this one. I think it's a good one to discuss the differences, the pros and the cons of regular whey protein. Now, again, we're not even talking here about isolates versus concentrates. That's a different topic, which I do have videos of. Again, if you're interested, you can watch them. But regular, intact, whole whey protein versus hydrolysate. So, what is a hydrolysate? That's going to be a fair question that some of you may have. Hydrolysates basically are, you take a whole protein, any protein, and you expose it to either acids or enzymes, or both. So what does that do? Well, that breaks down the protein, that chops up the protein into peptides. If you want to get technical about it, the acid unravels the protein. Proteins are in what we call three-dimensional shapes. They're in a quaternary or three-dimensional type shape. They sort of, if you're looking at them, let's see, in a chemistry setting, they're sort of coming a sort of a ball, and that shape, that three-dimensional shape, which is its bioactive shape, basically, protects it from being easily digested and unraveled. So you swallow a protein, it's exposed to acid, that unravels the protein so that the enzymes can actually get to it and chop it up. So first, usually what you would do in digestion, and if you're going to make hydrolysates, you're trying to mimic what the digestive system would do to present to you these peptides, because that's what your digestive system is going to do. It's going to break it down into peptides or individual amino acids. You're going to absorb it, and good things will happen. So when you're making a hydrolysate, you are usually, but not always, exposing it to an acid, but then you're usually going to expose it to a number of enzymes. These enzymes are also quite specific. The enzymes are going to go after the proteins at very specific amino acid cleavage sites. Again, that's above beyond the this talk, because that would just, again, my problem, as I said in the beginning, the reason I haven't talked about this topic is it is really a complex topic. So the original reason for hydrolysates, the invention of hydrolysates for people, was under, again, specific clinical situations. They also give them to infants because, again, infants don't have a mature digestive system, and so giving them proteins that have already been hydrolyzed into fragments, into peptides, into amino acids, helps them absorb it. But there are also clinical situations for adult humans who may have damage to their GI. They may have some of the large portion of their GI removed due to a disease or cancer or something. There are, and this paper does actually discuss that a bit, which is good. So let's get into this a little bit. I promise you, if you stick with me, you're going to learn a lot of information about the differences on this topic, research, proteins in general, hydrolysates. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I promise that we're going to actually get into some pretty good information here. Again, and there's no doubt I'll miss something. Unfortunately, like I said, there's just no way to cover it. But so this is a paper that does get cited a lot by both pro people looking. So your basic study, right? I'm going to take this I'm going to start with this, assuming you don't read studies at all. So your basic study, obviously you got your title. You have an abstract. The abstract is just a summary of the full paper. Unfortunately, again, a lot of people, including scientists and medical doctors who should know better, often just read the abstract and don't read the paper and quote it. Now, you would think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, one, obviously the devil is in the details. The details matter, and they're in the paper. Two, unfortunately, a lot of times the abstract does not reflect what happens in the paper. I know that sounds like weird, but humans are humans, and they know, most people publishing a paper know that the majority of people reading them are not going to read the paper. They're going to read the abstract, and so they're going to shape that. And I'm being kind here without just saying negative things. They're going to shape the abstract to sound like the outcome was what they wanted it to be. They're just people, and they want to paint that study in the best possible light, and sometimes the abstract is close to what is found in the paper without, once you get into the details, and sometimes, frankly, the abstract has surprisingly little to do with what is in that paper as far as what they find. They might say something very positive in the abstract, so we're in methods. They give you the results. We're just going to scroll down a little bit. So, and then once you get past the abstract, you get into the actual paper, and this is where the details lie. So, the conclusion of their abstract, we conclude the small doses of WPH, which is whey protein hydrolysate, that is the enzymatically chopped up version, and we're going to get into another part right there that's going to kind of put a real cold kibosh on a lot of this for you all. Okay. We conclude small dose of WPH effectively increases leucine transport into muscle. That sounds good, right? Activating mTOR C1. mTOR is the major anabolic pathway. There's mTOR C1, there's mTOR C2. They have different effects in tissue. Again, really beyond the scope of this talk here, but most of you probably heard about mTOR. mTOR is also an entirely different topic that athletes and bodybuilders have gotten excited about mTOR because if you stimulate the mTOR pathway, it can increase muscle protein synthesis and potentially bodybuilding and all that. Now, interestingly enough, in the anti-aging circles, anti-aging scientists and stuff are actually taking medications and stuff that block mTOR, or at least blunt it. You don't want to block it. If you block it completely, you're going to be in trouble. But the interesting thing is they are searching out and taking drugs like rapamycin and stuff that actually blunt mTOR. Because if you are growing things with mTOR, remember, you may be growing things that is not just muscle. You can grow cancer, and you can grow blocking arteries and so forth. And it's interesting to note that in animals, at least, blunting mTOR actually extends lifespan. Now, very controversial topic. Cannot go down this rabbit hole. Just FYI, the sort of excitement and the sort of wholesale interest in activating mTOR. Now, this is where mTOR C1 and mTOR C2 come in, because if you can preferentially activate one of them, that one actually may be more beneficial in terms of activating muscle mass and not activating some of the things you don't want to activate. But that would be something you all would have to go look into. Anyway, on paper, what we're reading, this sounds good, right? WPH, anabolic potency and efficacy for promoting overall muscle protein anabolism, i.e. anabolic building muscle, is similar to whey, an intact protein source. So now, if you just notice, they even kind of, they kind of put a little bit of a damper on this too. You just notice that it's found that WPH, i.e. the hydrolyzed version, effectively increases leucine transport into muscle, which it should. mTOR C1, MPS means muscle protein synthesis, all sounding good. However, notice that it was similar to intact non-hydrolyzed whey. Well, that ain't that exciting, is it? So now let's get into the little more details here. Now here's a sidebar. As I promised you, I'm going to be taking a number of sidebars, but this is a really important part here for you guys to understand. Hydrolyzed protein, there is an amount, a level of hydrolysis that you can hydrolyze a protein. A lot of people think when they buy a can of hydrolyzed protein or whey that has hydrolysis, it's totally hydrolyzed. It's all chopped up into dipeptides and tripeptides and amino acids. Life is good. This is not at all the case. The commercial whey proteins that you're going to get over the counter are going to be in the 10% hydrolyzed. They're not going to be heavily hydrolyzed. And the reason for that is taste. Fully hydrolyzed proteins are very bitter, and you wouldn't sell one can to anybody if you were to use actual fully hydrolyzed proteins that have been hydrolyzed. All the 100% of the protein has been hydrolyzed down to dipeptides, which is 2 amino acids, tripeptides, oligopeptides, and so forth. The amount that you're going to get in your typical over-the-counter hydrolyzed protein, let's say, is around 10%, give or take, and that is really due to taste. And cost too, but really taste. So again, you're not getting fully hydrolyzed protein. So right off the top, I've just thrown something at you that you're probably not aware of. So now, muscle mass is controlled by the dynamic and concurrent cellular process of protein synthesis, MPS, and breakdown, MPB. The balance between synthesis and breakdown rates determine whether muscle undergoes growth or atrophy. Okay, so that's a really important first opening sentence right there, which you notice is not in the abstract. So a lot of proteins we notice when they just look at MPS, which is synthesis, goes up, and they don't actually account for breakdown or the net balance, and which gets people excited. You say, well, it increased protein synthesis, we're gaining muscle, life is good, and that is again not the case. Hold on. Okay, so no, if you're just looking at muscle protein synthesis, synthetic rates, and you're not looking at breakdown rates and net balance, you are missing trees for the forest or forest for the trees, whichever that one is. And so this one, again, I'm using the study because they did a lot of things well in this study. They looked at both synthetic rates, the building of protein or muscle, the breakdown, and looked at the net balance. To determine the total net effect on the body, and that's kind of the money. You got to do that, or you're not seeing the whole effect here. So the intake of dietary protein, in particular essential amino acids (EEA), has been shown to stimulate protein synthesis via nutrient-sensitive cell signaling pathways, regulated by activation of mechanistic target of rapamycin complex 1. Okay, don't worry about that. Don't memorize any of that. That is what I was talking about earlier, is that mTOR 1 and 2 are the sort of major anabolic pathways. Now, here's another sidebar we got to talk about. EEAs, essential amino acids. 10 years or so ago, it may be longer, but let's call it 10 years. There was this huge leucine craze. Everybody was going bonkers for leucine, because again, it was learned that leucine is the major anabolic driver of the mTOR pathway. It is the sort of key amino acid in protein that controls muscle protein synthesis, turns on mTOR. Everybody, lost their minds over leucine. There were a lot of papers that were written about leucine. There were, of course, a lot of interest in branched-chain amino acids, which, of course, leucine is one of them, and off it went. And that, there was, even people that had their whole PhDs focused on that. So that was kind of a hot ticket item and a big craze for a while. And what happened to that was the human body being what it is, really does not allow for you or anybody to just sort of drop in one magic ingredient through their diet and get, bypass, stimulate these pathways indefinitely. So the two main things were basically, as time went on, things were discovered. As expected, you can only put so much leucine in the pathway and continue to drive it. But once you oversaturate the pathway, no extra, keep pounding the pathway with leucine is going to keep boosting it up. So there's a limited amount of leucine that you're going to ingest, and anything great is going to happen. Two, what they also learned was that in the presence of EEAs, essential amino acids, you also needed those too to further stimulate mTOR and have the effect of leucine on that pathway. And so what quickly became apparent, or maybe not so quickly, but what became apparent was you were only going, the leucine had its limits. That once you would hit your requirement of leucine, extra leucine wasn't going to make any big difference, and you still needed EAAs and so forth. Well, what do you find when you have a protein that's high in leucine, BCAAs, and a great EAA profile? You have whole protein, and specifically you have whey protein. So you kind of come full circle. All right, that's another sidebar on understanding the whole leucine, BCAA, EEA craze that has petered out. But what you're basically left with is what is basically whey protein. Now, okay. So over the past years, I'm getting a little bit of a frog here. Okay, so let us scroll along. We're going to get to some good stuff, and this is why I've never gone into hydrolyzed proteins. So they did a really good job of looking at hydrolyzed protein to intact whey protein. And by the way, I got to go back again, unfortunately, a little bit when I was talking about the level of hydrolysis of these proteins. I can't find the level of hydrolysis, what they used in this study. Now, I don't know if I'm missing it. Maybe it's in a supplementary material or something, because a lot of studies they offer, but usually it's in the materials and methods section or at the very bottom under acknowledgments. I couldn't find it. I don't know how hydrolyzed this protein was, whether it's just an easy-to-find commercial product or something they had made themselves or what. But the level of hydrolysis is very important to what they discovered or did not discover. Okay, so one of the big reasons of WPH, hydrolyzed protein, becoming sort of from a marketing perspective, as I said, there are definitely benefits and uses to hydrolyzed proteins in certain clinical settings and stuff. But where it became popular in the sort of athletic world, post-workout, that kind of thing, is that you're going to get a much faster uptake of these amino acids. There's going to be a faster absorption, going to get faster blood levels, and then the theory would go to the average sort of, athlete, bodybuilder, coach kind of person would say, well, that's a good thing, right? Because, post-workout you want to get it into muscles as fast as possible and all that. This is not really the case in terms of when you're talking about healthy, active people with a healthy GI. Whey is already a very, what they call a fast protein. It is a highly soluble protein. It is absorbed and into the bloodstream very quickly. It only, obviously, if you're going to break it down into amino acids, it's even faster, but faster is not necessarily better. There are, in fact, potential negatives. The body can only handle so much amino acids or anything being dumped into the system, and what happens is it will oxidize these amino acids. It'll send it into different pathways to oxidize it, whether it's used as energy, whether it gets stored as glycogen, whether it gets theoretically converted to fat, though it's really difficult to do, or just excreted or what have you. The sort of faster is better model is not at all necessarily true, especially with whey proteins in healthy people. There's been other examples of other supplements that were meant to, the rapid uptake was supposed to be like a great thing, and it turned out not to be true, because again, you can only shove so much of anything into into circulation, which then has to be taken up by tissues. And if that doesn't happen, if it's coming into the circulation so fast, tissue cannot take it up and deal with it. It has to go somewhere, and it has to go somewhere quickly. And there's a whole breakdown of where it goes. I'm not going to get into it, but anyway, the more is better or faster is better model in this particular case is not necessarily happening. So what did they find? Basically, they found that the hydrolyzed whey protein in these athletic young men did raise amino acid levels, leucine and phenylalanine, a little quicker. They did find a slight increase in muscle protein synthesis, but at the end of the day, as far as what we talked about earlier, net protein balance, which is really what matters, there were no differences. So I'm not necessarily, totally poo-pooing the hydrolysate type thing, but we haven't even gotten into what I consider the most important topics. So let's talk about something else here. I'm trying to see if, there's other negatives I could point out about this study in terms of it's a small study, but they did, like I say, they did a lot of things really well, and I have to really give them credit. It was only 10 people in the study, and they did it as a crossover study, which I think was actually pretty smart of them. But let's talk about something else that they didn't even look at. So, again, what is whey protein? What are the benefits of whey protein? If you are strictly looking at whey protein as a protein replacement, post-workout kind of thing, you're already making a mistake. You've already missed the benefits of whey protein. Whey protein is good for all of that too, but what really makes whey protein special, in my view, is the fact that it increases glutathione, that it contains a bunch of bioactive peptides, such as lactoferrin, that are great for the immune system and anti-cancer, antiviral, antimicrobial. So what happens when you take whey protein and you chop up some of these peptides into fragments, into smaller fragments? Well, you are going to damage these bioactive peptides. And when I was talking about earlier, remember I was talking about lack of comparative studies in this particular area. Now, here's a good study that we're looking at, that they are looking at some things that are interesting just to athletes as far as protein synthesis and that type of thing, and don't find any major groundbreaking differences, mind you. But if they were to compare, let's say, a hydrolysate to an intact, properly made whey protein and looked at immune system, looked at glutathione, looked at a number of things, which they did not, well, what would they find? And this is really the important part. Whey protein, again, has a lot of benefits to it that are well beyond its simple protein content, well beyond simply the fact that it has high leucine and so forth. And so if you're not aware of that, and you're only looking at, and you think that, well, I'm getting these amino acids into my system that much faster, it must be a benefit. It's not the case. So there's a whole problem there. The next thing we would have to do to really decide on hydrolysates versus intact whey protein is look at all the other benefits of whey protein, which is, like I said, its effect on glutathione and possibly on cancer and immunity and all that. And if you take those bioactive proteins and you chop them all up, you are probably, I'm going to say, I'm only saying probably because we need more data, but it's pretty much of a lock that you're going to damage the ability of those proteins to do their thing, which makes whey protein so special. From a strictly post-workout point of view, there may be some very minor advantages to these hydrolysates, but again, they aren't showing themselves to be anything all that special. And again, if you narrow in on just a couple of key things like muscle protein synthesis, they can appear superior. If you look at things like muscle protein synthesis plus muscle protein breakdown, and you look at the net effect and all that, not so much. Again, we're not seeing anything. Now, if you're someone with special digestive GI issues, babies, there may be some benefits there in people with certain GI diseases for sure. Again, I'm not saying they're of no value, but I'm looking now at results. Let's see, blood amino acid concentrations, WPH and whey, increased plasma valine, 60 minutes, leucine for 90 minutes, phenylalanine, 45 minutes, plasma amino acid, did not differ between the two beverages. So as you see, working our way through, we don't see big differences here. There's area under the plasma valine. They're looking at different amino acids basically. Now, the big one that people get really excited about as far as muscle protein synthetic rates, mTOR complex and all that is going to be, of course, leucine. But plasma leucine, notice there's a slight difference at extended time between one or the other. Again, it's not very high though. Trying to think if there's anything else that I am missing, because I don't want to miss. I'm trying to get to the really important stuff here as to what you guys really need to know here. Blood glucose, lactate, they were about the same. The differences were pretty minor. Let's see if we can get to anything else that I think you guys need to know about. Remain slightly elevated. No. So sometimes also, for people who don't want to read, all the breakdown and all that, a lot of times, if you want to be semi-lazy, that is, you want to be better than just reading the abstract, but you may not read the entire paper. Getting to the discussion, sometimes that's kind of where the meat of the good stuff is, and just the conclusion at least. I've read this paper through a couple of times. And also, there's no reason, again, in the reason that nutrition and supplements and stuff and politics, is so polarized and stuff where there's, this sort of black, white, good, bad attitude stuff. There's nothing to say you can't use both, if you want to. Now, I tend to generally am more using whey and recommending whey. Obviously, it's an excellent protein replacement. It's damn near perfect in terms of its amino acid profile, its BCAAs, its leucine, its F, and all that, plus all the bioactive peptides. So I'm mostly interested in using and recommending whey, and in my formula, more in the sort of health, anti-aging, muscle preservation role. I'm not really looking at it necessarily from trying to optimize, the post-workout protein synthetic rate kind of thing. I'm at a stage and age and whatever in my own life where my interest is definitely in health and wellness and all that, but there's nothing to say that, one can't use both. Intact whey for its glutathione promoting, immune supporting benefits, and hydrolyzed whey, if you want to, in addition to or part of or whatever. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Now, again, hydrolyzed whey costs more, and if it's like I say, and as a member, even the stuff you're buying over the counter is not fully hydrolyzed. If it was, like I say, if you've ever had fully hydrolyzed whey, you know what I was talking about. It tastes like ass. So there's really a good reason why you're not seeing that. Let's see. I'm scrolling down as we're talking, but yeah, like I say, there's other studies. I like this. I thought this was a good one to kind of go through with people to see what is really going on. Here's where the discussion. Okay, so discussion. The aim of this study was to compare the effect of whey, intact whey, to its hydrolysate form, WPH, on amino acid delivery, transport into muscles, and mTOR1 signaling. and MPS. The primary finding of our study is that WPH and whey ingestion in young men produced a similar muscle protein anabolic response. Again, that doesn't sound real exciting nor very dramatic, and it's not. Ingestion of protein, or EEA, has a potent effect on stimulating MPS in human subjects. This is a different topic they kind of go into, which is interesting topics, not that valuable, but they do talk about, again, the higher the quality of the protein, the better the amino acid profile, the less you can use, which makes sense, right? The lower the quality of protein, the basic rule is you just need more of it. Here's a little sidebar again we can talk about as far as animal-based proteins versus vegetable-based proteins. 10, 20 years ago, there was always kind of a position that animal-based proteins were inherently superior as far as building muscle and that kind of thing is concerned. And really, what it came down to is, again, data went on, all you really need is just more of the lower quality protein. By and large, the lower you go in protein, the higher the quality it needs to be. But, probably just takes about 30% more plant-based proteins to get the same effects as far as muscle protein synthesis and that type of thing. Now, we're not talking about other stuff as far as glutathione and immune boosting and such. But by and large, again, humans are true omnivores. We are the most successful omnivores on the planet, and one of the major reasons for that is we can eat damn near anything and survive. And so, again, these very sort of dogmatic, limited views of what we could eat and what we can't eat to survive or not survive, we're just not correct. And so as time went on, the basic conclusion that we're at these days is that plant-based proteins are perfectly adequate from a strictly protein replacement perspective. You just got to eat more. So this whole section here I'm not going to get into because they sort of go down a bit of a rabbit hole about basically you can eat a fairly small amount. Now that may apply or may be of some value, let's say when you're dieting, when you're trying to preserve muscle mass. Well, the quality of the protein, if you are dieting and you are reducing calories, the quality of the protein is going to matter more. So you are definitely going to want to pay more attention to that. You may also, like there's one plant-based protein company that I've actually done a little bit of work with at their booth and stuff. I'd made some videos that took a blend, so they sort of optimized or at least improved the amino acid profile by blending plant-based proteins, and they added in some EAAs to bring up to basically mimic the amino acid profile of whey. So again, there are much more technically quality plant-based proteins coming out that are, again, from a strictly protein replacement, protein synthesis rate probably going to be pretty similar, pretty bang on to high quality whey. Okay, so what are we getting to? I'm going to try to wrap this up because we've already been at this for a while. But again, and I can tell you guys, if you think some of this was complicated or I was covering a lot of ground, I'm not even touching the surface of where we could go as to the finer points, the nuances, and the context of hydrolysates as they compare to intact proteins, as to both pros and cons. Okay. Let's see. So, recent evidence suggests that hydrolyzed whey protein contains peptides that can be easily digested and absorbed compared to a whole protein source and may have a greater effect on MPS, muscle protein synthesis. Our hypothesis was that a dose of 0.08 gram per kg WPH would induce greater increase in muscle protein anabolic response than the same amount of whey, intact non-hydrolyzed, which would translate to a potential greater gain or maintenance of muscle mass. Now what they do in here is they do kind of go into that discussion that I mentioned earlier. What they say is that there may be some clinical settings where this is a benefit, and it may be, i.e., hospitalized settings, cachexia, which basically is a fancy word for massive muscle loss due to disease and cancer and stuff. Let's see. So there's sort of a whole discussion here where they're discussing how in certain cases there may be specific benefits. But they don't really go on to say that it's going to increase whole muscle body protein levels in healthy young people lifting weights, which is why a lot of people take it. So they kind of make a case for it, understandably, that there may be, you know, specific benefits, specific situations where hydrolyzed proteins could be of benefit. But they don't. It doesn't go on to say that, in their opinion, if you take their hydrolyzed whey protein, you're going to gain more muscle mass over time versus basically intact protein. And like I say, if you remember what I said earlier, there are even some potential negatives in favor or not in favor of hydrolyzed proteins, as far as amino acids showing up in circulation so rapidly that the body can't actually do anything with them, and has to put them down other pathways into ATP production, into glycogen storage, fat storage, and so forth. But it's, like I say, it's got to go somewhere, and you can only pump so much of it in there. Again, the human body is pretty regulated in that. So let's see. Our study, we observed no statistically significant difference in the plasma concentration of BCAAs, valine, leucine, and isoleucine. All the amino acid studies reached their peak 30 minutes after and returned to baseline within 90 minutes. The WPH group consistently presented a higher, but not significantly so, that's very important, concentration at 15 minutes from consumption compared to whey. They do go on to talk about leucine kinetics, yada, yada, yada. None of which, like I say, kind of leaves you with a feeling like, okay, it's worth paying extra money and losing the possible benefits of normal intact whey protein for the effects that these guys saw. Let's see, 20 minutes. I'm trying to look for anything else. Concentration, insulin concentrations were very similar. mTOR. I'm going to try to wrap this up for you all. I think that's about all I'm going to say. I will link this paper underneath. Feel free to read it, and if you have comments on the paper specifically, as I interpreted it and gave it to you, feel free to do that. You've got other papers you want me to look at, but just make sure before you do that that you listen to this video and you absorbed what I was saying, because a lot of times, you know, people kind of, again, they jump the gun and say, well, what about that? What about that? And I don't do it to sound rude, but my response is often, hey, it's covered in the video. I did cover it, so, you know, listen to the video. These days, we all have, including myself, some very short attention spans for stuff, and we, you know, tend to sort of have a selection bias where we still want to see what we want to see in a thing. So let's see. So we conclude that the bioactive peptides contained in the hydrolyzed form of whey can be easily digested and absorbed compared to the whole protein source. That's true, but it's the context is whey is very easily absorbed, very easily digested, very quickly taken up. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. We're not talking about, you know, casein, which sits down there for a long time, or you know, a whole protein from steak or something. The way they're saying it is a little bit, I feel a little bit disingenuous as far as the realities of intact non-hydrolyzed whey. Okay. And may be an alternative nutritional strategy to improve protein synthesis in clinical conditions associated with muscle wasting. Okay, that is exactly what I said, right? Notice they don't, even they in their own studies don't say, you know, as well as, you know, young, healthy athletes trying to gain muscle. They're not, I got to give them credit on this paper. I think they did a lot of things really well as far as what they looked at, how they tested it, the conclusions they came to, and all that. And you notice, again, give them props that they are pulling the potential benefit from their results in the correct direction. That is, there may be some additional benefits here in like I say, in clinical conditions and people with muscle wasting and so forth, maybe people with Crohn's, that type of thing. There are some the other area, and they don't mention this unfortunately in this study, another area there may be some benefits with hydrolyzed protein of all kinds, but let's say whey particularly, is that somebody that has a genuine milk allergy. And I say genuine, this is not very common. A lot of people that think they have milk allergies do not. What they have is an issue with the sugar. But if they have there is one of the peptides, one of the protein peptides in whey called beta-lac is one of the more allergenic peptides. And if you have a genuine a genuine allergy to beta-lac, like I say, which is not that common, hydrolyzed protein, again, chopping up that protein with enzymes would be a benefit. That would probably bypass that problem. And they don't actually mention that. So there's another one that even I'm adding. Let me add one reason you may want to use a hydrolyzed protein. But as I said, it's not very common. But again, in infants and stuff, whose digestive system is obviously not fully formed, they may have difficulty breaking that protein down into amino acids and peptides, absorbing it. That's why you will find hydrolyzed proteins in baby food and stuff. So it makes some sense. And again, remember, it's not like you can't use both if you want to. If you're using whey, properly made whey protein that has been produced under conditions that maintain those delicate peptides, you don't want to chop them up with a bunch of enzymes, because again, you're not going to get the glutathione production, and you're not going to get the benefits of these bioactive peptides such as lactoferrin, of which I have written an awful lot about. Okay, so we're at acknowledgement, so I think we can get rid of this. All right, sorry guys, I had a frog today and having a little problems here. All right, so that is almost the rabbit hole of giving you just a sense of why I have never really gone into great depth as to hydrolyzed proteins versus intact whey proteins, and why I don't really recommend them wholesale or across the board for athletes and just healthy people and beyond that. And like I say, I'm sure I missed something, and I can assure you it literally just skimmed the surface of this. So let me know if you like this video. Leave some comments. Like the video for a bro, because I supply a lot of information about this particular product, but other products in general I don't see anywhere else, and I don't get the type of views I probably should. Maybe I'm talking too sort of over the, but unfortunately there's certain topics you just cannot bring down to oversimplified where they're no longer correct. And this is what a lot of sellers of obviously a lot of things, but hydrolyzed supplements have done, hydrolyzed protein have done, and I don't want to be that guy. And now hopefully you have your answer. So see you guys on the brink.